Imagine seeing one Hong Sang-soo and being like, wow, I can't wait to see every single other work from that filmmaker.
Yeah.
And just realize the treasure trove exactly that you're gonna have. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cannes Canon, the show where we look at Cannes competition filmmakers' previous work to understand them better. And today we're starting with my first teammate here. I've chosen as Mascha Schilinski for her new film, Sound of Falling, and it's her second film. Mascha Schilinski is a Berlin-based German filmmaker. I think she's born and raised. Her first film is Dark Blue Girl. It came out in 2017. It revealed Helena Zengel. That film was at the Berlin Film Festival in the Perspektive Deutsch Kino section. Since then, Schilinski has directed a little bit of TV here and there, but we hadn't heard of Schilinski when she did Dark Blue Girl.
No, frankly, we hadn't heard of her 2 months ago.
Yeah, until just recently when she was accepted into competition. This is the kind of like big surprise inclusion in competition from a filmmaker who is completely unproven amongst the canon. From what we know of her, from the work we've seen her put out, what makes her worthy of a prestigious Cannes competition slot that even Jim Jarmusch can't get this year?
Well, something that I'm seeing, at least this year in the Cannes competition, is it seems like they are prioritizing more and more the new cinema. And normally, I think that the Cannes competition heavily favors the old masters, heavily favors the ones who have storied, long careers. But it seems like this year, for whatever reason, Favreau has really prioritized the cinema of new. It's very interesting that Schilinski is here because Dark Blue Girl wasn't even really released outside of Germany. It didn't really see any sort of traction whatsoever. It feels like the filmmaker that made Dark Blue Girl went away and now someone new is emerging.
I think she's still there, but kind of like how we can judge Julia Ducournau with Mange. It doesn't give us a full picture of what her abilities will ultimately be. You know what I mean?
And Schilinski could have a similar trajectory. She makes a film, maybe she doesn't feel it's the best representation of her talent, and now she's back with Sound of Falling, which has the buzz to potentially be the talk of the festival.
I think that we're going to be able to glean some things about Dark Blue Girl that will have been hints about Sound of Falling, but we just don't know what they are yet. One thing we do know about Schilinski is her ability to direct child actors. I think this reveals a certain skill or a certain interest in the childhood perspective, given that this is not just the slice of life or the coming of age of a child. It's more so, you know, what does a child take in? What is the intelligence of a child of a certain age?
She absolutely has a talent for working with child actors. Part of it could be that we're looking at Helena Zengel, who is, I would say, one of the best child actors that we've got at the moment.
She's incredible in System Crashers.
Yeah, I was literally about to say System Crasher. It's easy to write off the work that Mascha Schilinski did with Helena Zengel here because Helena Zengel's just so damn good. Something that stood out to me, I really liked the silences in the film. The way that the film begins is with these images of waves and images of sand and the beach dunes. She's stepping away from narrative to just give us moments of stillness. And a lot of filmmakers do this. This is not a special thing. Maybe the film isn't entirely there, but I can absolutely see how a filmmaker like this, with the instincts that she seems to have, could hopefully go on to create a masterpiece.
I didn't get that feeling watching Dark Blue Girl, and that's not to say that I don't think she can make a masterpiece. I'm just saying, like, based on that film, I don't see the spark of a genius.
First films are not always indicative.
Exactly, they're not. I mean, Sean Baker's first film is famously Nose is Bad, and this is a very accomplished film, and there are a lot of nice flourishes and some smart screenwriting
technically
ideas.
Very well done.
It's not necessarily like super ambitious on a thematic level, but it's a bit ambitious in the structure. It's the kind of film I think we're going to look back on and be like, oh yeah, I can see like a couple things here and there.
Yeah, it could be one of those films that's just seen as a minor work.
Yeah.
With that said, I do think it's quite ambitious to make a sort of reverse Parent Trap movie, where instead of you having a child wanting to get their family back together, you have a child who wants to keep them apart because she liked the attention she got.
I'm
almost going into these Freudian elements of her actually just being in love with her father.
And then falling a little bit out of love, or if we're talking about ambition, I think something that's quite interesting about this film is how, you know, it takes a good like 30 minutes being in apartments in Berlin
Before we get
with
to
these
the
three
meat of
characters, and then we just go to Greece for the rest of the film. And it's there that like things get more complicated and there's a different vibe going on.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we have this story about two adults who are trying to do the best thing for their kid by getting back together. Little do they know that that's not what their kid wants.
Yeah. It's this kind of like point of view of a child that is like, that doesn't see the full picture, you know? And they just want that, like that immediate response or that immediate feeling of gratification or whatever. And they just see the situation as, I want daddy to love me, I don't like my mommy. You know?
Yeah, there's a scene in the middle of the movie where the father says, I love you, but I don't love you the way I love your mom. And she's like, well, I don't understand that. That's not fair, I want all of it.
The heart of the film is basically, you know, what can a child do to interfere or to impact the relationship of their parents. You know, there's a moment in the film, and it's something we hear in real life, which is, you know, divorced parents talking to their kid and be like, the fact that we're not together, it's not because of you. You question yourself. You're like, but are they just saying that? The child is going to be a factor of the couple no matter what. So, you know, it's something you say as like a white lie. Even if it's true, it's never going to be completely true because things are complicated. When it's said in the film, you immediately tell yourself, like, how true is that statement? And especially the way this film sees it, like, I think it accords a lot of intelligence to the young girl. She's going to emotionally manipulate them.
Oh yeah,
you know?
She's a monster.
She's going to hurt them, like, emotionally speaking. And her parents are clearly not immune to her.
Well, in a way, and I think that you could look at the angle of it going to Greece almost as a literal manifestation of the Oedipal complex. This would be more of an Electra complex, but it's still the same idea of she wants to essentially, in some way, kill the mother, marry the father. And that's what she wants, but she's so misguided in all of this.
And I like that, you know, she doesn't have a grand master plan or anything. It's just, sure, she's purposeful in her actions, but it's not like she has all the chess pieces and she knows exactly what she's doing. It's nothing stupid like that.
She's just causing chaos.
She's just, exactly.
She's not thinking about what's going to happen in a week. She's thinking about, if I do this thing right now to hurt my parents, then my dad's going to come and comfort me.
Exactly. I want a hug now. It's not, I want my dad to be with me forever. Otherwise, I can see, like, in the craft of the film that there is value to, like, the way the colors are.
Yeah,
you know, it's a film called Dark Blue Girl. The apartment of the dad is a little bit more warm. You know, there are little details like that, which, you know, hats off, I guess, like cool little details. At a certain point, there are things like visual symbols and whatnot, which, you know, on paper is the mark of like a filmmaker that can represent their ideas through visual symbols and that kind of stuff. But through my eyes, I'm like, I see your symbol. And it feels a bit film schooly, you know?
Right. Some of the ways that they approach
like they feel too easy, or they feel a little bit too simple. The elephant plush toy, the way it's used and like thrown off the cliff at the end. It's
which I do, the thing that I like symbolically about the elephant toy is how massive it is. And the image of her father having to carry it all the way to the villa is really, I thought that was pretty interesting because it's a deliberate inconvenience to him.
No, okay, fair enough. For a film to be truly great, it needs to be full, like it needs to feel really novel and original, and like when it feels like it's grocery list a little bit. And this film doesn't feel like a grocery list, but there's some items that kind of feel like, oh, we're gonna do that like how films do it.
Which
you know what I mean?
Is interesting because I've never seen a story like this before.
That's what I mean. The story is really original.
It's a wholly original idea that's kind of approached in a way where I'm like, okay, somehow you made an idea that I've never seen before feel a little bit been there, done that.
And I think the film, in parts, is really, really well done. And I mean, I'm thinking of the scene where they're on the rooftop and Helena Zengel wants to keep hugging her dad.
Yeah, and they're trying to
she has
pull
to be separated
Yeah.
by force. And there are like little ideas like that that feel really truthful. I feel like I've done that as a child, or I feel like I've seen other children do this. These little moments, I think those little truths can be maybe the spark of a strong filmmaker.
And possibly, and I think we've got two things here, which is an original concept and those little sparks of moments. And if you can keep that original concept going, you know, find more original concepts, keep delivering on those sparks, but then make the bones a little bit stronger, the foundation, and build some of the ideas that it's not just the little moments, it's the big moments too.
Du bist nicht meine Mama.
Wie kommst du auf so einen Quatsch, Luca? Weißt du was, Luca? Ich bin deine Mutter und ich habe dich in meinem Bauch gehabt und ich habe dich geboren und ich kann mich ganz gut daran erinnern.
Und ich glaube, ich wurde bei der Geburt vertauscht.
Und ist Papa auch nicht ein richtiger Papa?
Doch, Papa ist Papa, das ist ja das Komische.
So, Matt, we are going to look into the films of my third pick, Sergei Losnitza.
This is a filmmaker that is one of my blind spots. I had previously only seen My Joy from him, and otherwise I am woefully unaware of Loznitsa's work.
I was very much surprised to see how few people had seen his films, considering he's still a filmmaker who was in Cannes competition, well, now 4 times.
He's probably the most important Ukrainian filmmaker we have right now, and it's shocking that there hasn't been some sort of push.
I know there were like a few pushes on certain films, whether they were documentaries about the issue. One of the films that very much describes the conflict in Ukraine would be Atlantis by Valentin Vasyanovich. I think that's one of the key Ukrainian filmmakers as well. But Sergei Losnitza is in a very, very interesting spot because he is not a particularly partisan filmmaker. This is a filmmaker who at first did not know he was going to be a filmmaker. He was born in the former Soviet Union, what would now be Belarus, and he moved early on to Ukraine, where he lived most of his early life, but he studied to be an engineer and a mathematician. And it's only later that he took a bit of an interest in photography and went to study in Moscow. And coming out of Moscow, he started to do a few short films here and there, but he moved to Germany in 2001. And I think he's been living there officially ever since with his family. So
Very interesting for films that have such strong Ukrainian identity and Soviet identity.
Yes, Loznitsa discusses and talks about, you know, keeping a certain distance to get a better picture of what he is, that way as to not be clouded or being biased by the people around him from that region. Which what you would think is, I'm gonna be surrounded by the people to truly get a sense of what they're like at the moment. But Loznitsa, I think he knows what Soviet culture and what Ukrainian culture is like, having lived there for so long in his life, that he can have that distance while also having that initial knowledge. His first notable film was Blockade, which came out in 2005, but his big leap was in 2010 with My Joy, which immediately, as his first narrative film, got him into the Cannes competition. And he has since been there in 2012 for In the Fog and 2017 for A Gentle Creature. But in between all of that time and up until now, he has made, and in some circles, is better known for his documentary work. And Loznitsa really operates in 3 different languages. He operates in fiction, in nonfiction, and in archive. His films can be classified in all of those categories if you are to simplify it a little bit. And he's been incredibly prolific, making on average 1 documentary every 2 years. The only success that Loznitsa has really found at Cannes is for the film Donbass in 2018, where he went to the Un Certain Regard category, but he won the directing prize there. When the Ukraine war really erupted in 2022, Loznitsa immediately, denounced Russia and denounced some of the film academies for not denouncing what was going on between Ukraine and Russia. But he also went against the Ukraine Film Academy, criticizing them for boycotting Russian filmmakers who are going against the grain. So Loznitsa really operates in these middle grounds. He's not going to be fully solely partisan towards a side or another. So that's Loznitsa in a nutshell, a filmmaker who is very politically intelligent and one who works primarily in documentaries, but in many forms of documentaries, which I think very much shapes his narrative work. I think he's a filmmaker who really thinks about form and who thinks what he can do with his form.
Which I think is important for any filmmaker. You have to think about every single choice. You can't just say, well, I'm gonna do it like this because that's how we've always done it. And his narrative work, from what I've seen, has been quite abstract at times. But I will say the parallel film that we watched here, A Gentle Creature, was something that I was much more able to get on board with.
He's not a purely like militant filmmaker. He likes to observe things and make us judge the images and not so much himself. It makes for a lot of great pitch black comedy. A Gentle Creature is a dramatic film, but it's also a pitch black comedy. You know?
It's quite funny at times.
Exactly, and when you look at the film as a whole, it's almost like a ginormous, cruel joke.
In a way, it's like the most dull farce you could think of. When I think of farce, I think of people slamming doors and running in circles, and that's what bureaucracy is in a way. It's the slowest moving version of a theatrical farce you could imagine.
You look at a film like Donbass, and again, you know, we're talking about the Donbass region in Ukraine, and you have a bunch of little vignettes, a bunch of different types of characters, and each vignette is there to kind of make fun of or critique a part of the system or a part of the kind of industrial war conflict in that region of the world.
There's so many modes that he operates on, and he seems to be pretty virtuosic in all of these different forms.
I feel like I've just barely scratched the surface.
Which is exciting. I love when you find a new filmmaker that you love and you feel like you've barely seen anything.
Imagine seeing one Hong Sang-soo and being like, wow, I can't wait to see every single other work from that filmmaker.
Yeah.
And just realize the treasure trove exactly that you're gonna have. A Gentle Creature follows a character that doesn't have a name, although she is credited as the Gentle Creature. She lives in a very kind of isolated, rural, random part of Russia. And she has a husband in jail, and she'd like to send a parcel full of, you know, little things that will make his life a little bit easier. Toothpaste, a rag, little things, you know, crackers that he might not be having as prison food. And that parcel, at the beginning of the film, is returned to her without an explanation. So she goes on a bit of a journey to try to send that parcel directly to the jail so that her husband can receive it. That's where the film starts, and the conflict is not resolved by the end.
And it's a simple conflict too. It's just a woman who has a question: where the hell is my husband? And why can't he get this package? Is it because I have something objectionable in the package? Is it like I could take something out and he'd get it? Or is it that you don't know where he is? And that's the question that is never resolved. And it's so endlessly frustrating to see her yanked in circles. On one hand, it's clearly inspired by Dostoevsky,
Yes.
including the title being taken from a short story by Dostoevsky, I believe.
Which we should note, it's not an adaptation. It's, you know, maybe there's some thematic similarities, but it is its own work.
I think it's mostly to signify that it's inspired by Dostoevsky's themes. But even more than Dostoevsky, I got a lot of Kafka from this. It is a film about the horrors of bureaucracy and being tugged in direction after direction with no end in sight.
The reason why I think this film really understands how that process works is that when we see these stories happen, oftentimes it's a character who is maybe a political figure or has done maybe some objectionable things and is suspicious about, you know, is he being treated this way because of his actions, but the government will not reveal it. Our main character here is an innocent nobody.
Has done nothing to anyone.
Who, by the way, is an extraordinary piece of casting because this woman's history is completely written on her face. Like, it feels like she has been beaten down throughout her whole life, and she's not even complaining about it. She just wants things to be okay. She'd like her husband to be okay. And she's a very like petite woman too, which makes it so that everybody around her can like, it feels like they are trampling on her. But I think that's the key to a real Kafkaesque film, in that it's not about the government subtly seeking retribution. It's about somebody being plucked out just randomly for whatever reason. The bureaucracy is not working for them.
Yeah.
And they have to go through this endless maze. And even when you start to find a way out of it, you know, like there's a whole plot thread. There's these kind of shady people telling her, oh, show me your passport, I can help you see your husband. And this is completely removed from the government. And then she gets to talk with a man who tells her like really weird, absurd story about this man's like finding the burnt body of his wife. And then the man just sees somebody else and he goes away never to be seen again. And that leads nowhere.
It's in a way about desperation and how the ordinary person is led to these desperate places. Like that is a very precarious situation with this man that she's in. And it feels like there could be violence at any time.
Yeah.
It's the looming feeling that something is not right throughout this film. This gentle creature could be any innocent person who just happens to be yanked around by a brutal system that is just a cold machine that, to put it not so delicately, fucks her roughly. That's exactly what happens with it. And
so should we talk about...
I think we should probably get into
spoilers. This is, we don't usually do spoilers, but I think we do have to say spoilers for this one.
Because this is, the ending here is...
The last 35 minutes?
Yeah.
Completely out of left field.
Absolutely confounding, and yet feels completely inevitable in what the film is.
It's crazy how like stylistically everything shifts.
It goes from a very realist feeling film to suddenly having this
the lights that are glowing,
the lights
and
are
the
glowing.
colors.
It feels like it's ripped from a different era. Like there's something almost alien about it, but it also feels very 60s, very 70s. It's like a propaganda film suddenly, where we have all of these characters that she has in some way encountered.
I mean, she essentially arrives to the candy house or whatever it's called from Hansel and Gretel. She eavesdrops onto what is like this glorified, like idealized communist fantasy group meeting of all these characters that you didn't necessarily think were important as you were watching the film, but you know, are now just sitting around like, yes, I've encountered this person, she is a good person. Each get their turn at like talking about their story in relation to the character we've been following and how all along it's about them, not her. But she's a good person. We approve of her. She should go see her husband, and we will send her off, and none of that matters because she literally gets fucked anyways.
Yeah, it is so painful to watch because we've seen her go through so much. This is very much like a dream sequence that we get at the end of this film, and all of these characters, it slips into this this almost metaphorical mode.
She is a character that doesn't say that much. She just kind of wanders and gets pushed around, and there is a depth that's given to a lot of the characters around. And at first I thought it was, oh wow, Loznitsa is really putting a lot of care into all his side characters, but turns out there's a much bigger payoff than you might have imagined.
Yeah, because every single one of them gets their moment. It really is as blunt of an ending as you possibly could get, but it doesn't feel like it's contrived. It feels like a natural conclusion.
Well, first of all, it's a very audacious last 30 minutes, and it really, for me, sticks the landing. She wakes up from the dream that she just had, and at first I was a little bit like, it's kind of a cop-out, but then you realize she's in the train station, and the beginning of the sequence you were seeing beforehand starts to happen again.
Yeah.
And so you realize what she's been dreaming of, it could have been a premonition.
Yeah, well, I would say less so necessarily a premonition. I think what it's trying to say is that the way that she envisions herself being taken advantage of by the system is what's happening. Yeah. This is not just a dream, this is her reality. This is unfortunately what she's going to continue going through, and her only crime was asking a question for people.
Your husband, we don't know where he is, he can't receive his parcel, you will have no explanation, you have to deal with that. Trust us.
Yeah.
That's it. She was ready to give up and go back home, and then she's suddenly taken away again to continue looking for her husband in this kind of futile...
Even at the end, it still feels plausible that everyone's just a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And that he's fine, and that the only thing is that they've messed up something administrative along the way. It feels like at any point she could get a paper that says, here's his death certificate.
I don't think she would get a paper. I think she'll just he'll just never come home.
Or he could show up one day 20 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
Мы их права защищаем, а они нам свастики рисуют. Стекла бьют. У меня за них, за всех сердце кровью обливается. А они нам вот эти лестницы зимой водой поливают, чтобы мы отсюда вообще выйти не могли. Как арестованные тут сидим.
Thank you for listening to our profiles. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to tune in tomorrow to see our reaction to these filmmakers' new films at Cannes. So see you on the Croisette.